Hey folks, Big Bear, Tony Sandoval again. I was just talking in another video a little bit ago about what I think are, when people ask me what's the most important thing about beekeeping to me to do for bees, and I was talking about reducing stress on bees. Another thing I wanted to talk about is people talk about the whole natural organic versus, beekeeper convenience-oriented kind of behaviors. Beekeeping as a process is a collaboration. It's a combination of the bees doing what bees do best, and a beekeeper getting what he or she wants from those bees. And so we place them in a hive that is designed to allow us to do that. Otherwise we'd just be, walk out and put a wall open, out there for them, and then just crack open the wall or something and do, raid them like they used to raid the old trees or tree stumps and stuff. And, the whole point is to spare them, such a huge intrusion, which usually ended in death. And on the other hand, we want to make it convenient for ourselves. We know that working with bees, is beekeeping itself for honey especially, it can be difficult. You're moving heavy boxes full of honey, and 90 to 100 pounds for a full deep super and 10 framer. You lift 9 or 10 of them off a stack and your back's going to be feeling it. So we want to do things that are both good for the bees and good for the beekeeper. That's just being practical. We can be idealistic all we want, but idealism is a good thing because it gives us a direction we want to go, and our path, what we want things to be. But we have to be practical at the same time and say, well, I can't have all of my ideals or values come true or happen exactly the way I want it, but I can come as close as I can by being practical and doing those things that I can do. It's just, one of the things that comes up is people always try to nail me on is supering versus nadering. First of all, supering is the process of adding new boxes to the top of the hive stack. So every time you add a box on top, you're supering, you're adding a super. Therefore, you've heard the phrase honey super. A honey super is a box you've placed on top for them to store honey in. Worre talks a lot about a process called nadering because that mimics the natural behavior of bees in a vertical void, like in a tree. And basically, when a bee colony starts in any void, they start at the top and they build wax down. The queen starts laying eggs and they start storing food and everything in the wax at the top. And as they draw more wax downwards, she moves down into the freshest wax, and they start backfilling the upper combs with honey for stores. So the queen's always moving downwards. The colony moves downwards. And so people who want to follow or mimic that because they believe that's, a better process, they will use a process called nadering. To nader is to add new boxes to the bottom of the stack. So instead of adding honey supers on the top, they're adding new brood chambers basically to the bottom, because the queen will move to the bottom. The whole brood section moves all the way down, and then they backfill the top with honey. Those become the honey supers, so to speak. The honey boxes anyway. And so that's how both of those work, and those are the main reasons for them. Now, I am a big proponent. I like the nadering system. I believe that it follows and it goes to reducing that stress on bees. Back to that. I like to follow the way bees naturally do things because it's part of their system. This is what they normally do. And if I can get what I want accomplished by letting them do what they normally do and just finding places I can tuck what I want in there along the way, then I'm not really interrupting them too much. And so I personally favor doing things that way. So I will always tell people, I believe the better way, for me anyway, to do things with beekeeping management is to nader boxes. I think that's healthiest for the bees. I think that's more natural, how they naturally behave on their own. by creating a hive system that naders. I am being scientifically organic. The scientific definition of organic is to copy, mimic, or imitate the natural behavior of another creature. That's how bees start their own nest inside of a natural void, like a tree or anywhere. And so I copy or mimic that in my hive, and it's organic by mimicking how they move in a vertical tree. So I just believe that's the better way to do it. However, having said that, and I've had people try to so-called bust me on doing that, because I believe, nadering is better or best, in my opinion, for working bees that way. But on the other hand, I just recently had surgery, a few surgeries actually, starting in December, and I'm still dealing with an issue of a necrotic pancreatitis. And the only reason that's relevant is I'm still dealing with all of that. And it's hard for me to bend and lift and carry any heavy things of substance. So picking up 3, 4, 5 boxes in a stack, and so that we can tuck another box on the bottom, is extremely difficult, if not still practically impossible for me right now, health-wise. So while ideally I hold that as my goal, as my objective, is to be able to manage hives that way, practically speaking, I know I can't do that. I just physically am not able to, and I don't have a lot of people that I can call on to help me to do other stuff like that, Everybody's got their own lives. They got to go to work. They got to do, I'm the one that's sick and not doing a whole lot right now. So I have to do things the best I can with what I have. That's being practical. So practically speaking, a lot of times this year, I am supering. When I first start off, I have my 2 deep boxes for the brood section, and normally I would lift them up and I add 1 or 2 new boxes to the bottom. And I did that because it was light, and I had my son to help me, and so I was able to do that because brood boxes are light anyway. Stick 2 new empty boxes underneath, that was light. I have no intention whatsoever going forward here in the next couple of weeks, as I start adding more boxes for honey production, honey storage. I'm not going to lift 4 boxes to add new boxes underneath. That's not going to happen, because they're already going to start to store honey in the upper 2 boxes, and then boxes are going to get heavy. That stack is going to get heavy. Lifting 4 boxes with 1 to 2 of them having deep frames of honey is just not practical. It's not realistic for me to do. So I'm going to super. I got my 4 that I started with. That lets them build the brood nest and give them space to grow without swarming too badly. They did, but I was able to, one of them did anyway. I caught the other one, and they didn't swarm, at least not yet, hopefully, knock on wood. The other one did swarm, but I caught them. Got them into a top bar hive. So it all works out in the long run, but either way, I'm not picking them up to nader more boxes. I'm going to super. I'm going to add supers onto the top to get honey. Now, people will look at me, well, then you're just a big old hypocrite, bag bear. You don't do what you say. Well, go away. Quit crying at me. I also, besides say I'm a scientifically organic beekeeper, I also believe in being practical. Being practical means operating a hive in a way that I'm best able to do that. That's just being realistic. That's having 1 foot in the real world. Yes, I have the ideals there, and if I can, I will follow those ideals. If I can't, then I'll do the next best thing under that. So, that's what I plan to do. Supering isn't a bad thing. I've never ever said supering is a bad thing. I just believe it's better. You got good, bad, good, better, best kind of scales, Supering is good. It's fine. But I just think it's better or best to nader. This is my own opinion, my own 2 cents. I'm never going to tell you must do it. You have to do it. It's a law that you got to do it. I'm not that kind of person. You keep bees with a management style that's most practical and fits your ideals best. For me, that's the way I look at it. Okay? So I'm going to super on top, because that's the next best thing I can do. I added the 2 new sections on the bottom because that with the time it was light, so I was able to partially nader to give them the brood area that I needed to give them. So I met it kind of halfway. Add brood to the bottom, let them grow that way for their brood area, and now I'll super on the top, because it's much easier for me to add 1 empty box, 2 empty boxes to the top, and then collect them when I'm healthier, feeling better, and got this tube out of my gut later in the year. I can do that a whole lot better than I can, trying to lift the whole stack to add new boxes and new boxes and new boxes, which is normally how I do that when I'm healthy and I've got the strength, to do that. So it's not a bad thing to compromise on ideals like that, especially, when you know that it's a compromise. You're not just in this just for pure bee, leave them alone and do nothing at all with them. You're in it because you're a beekeeper and you want to get something out of it. Wax, honey, pollination, something. In order for me to do that, I have to practically be practical about it and manage those hives in a way that's best going to be able for me to manage them while keeping them as healthy and reduce stress on them as much as possible. That's the second step, best way for me to do that practically. And that's how I'm going to do it. I think that in the long run it'll work out. And then if I get to a point where, again, I'm healthy and physical, able to nadir the whole time, then I'll get back to doing that because that's what I think is best. But until then, got to do with what's real. Got to live in the real world. We can't live with pie in the sky kind of a deal, much as we'd like to. We got to be realistic. We got to be practical, hands-on. What can we actually do? And then we have to work and live in that world. So when it comes to beekeeping, I try to be practical. I try to be realistic while still holding as true as I can to my ideals. And that's how I approach my beekeeping and my management side is, I'll always try to meet my ideals first, and then I have kind of like a step down process. Okay, if I can't do that, what's the next best thing I can do? What's the next best thing I can do? To make those two worlds meet. That's what I got for now on that topic anyway. Y'all have a good one and enjoy your bees.